All right, everybody, welcome. Happy Friday. We are here today talking about career fair preparation, which is right around the corner, potentially today. I don't know if anyone went to, there's a real estate career fair today. So we will be talking about all the things that will be helpful for you, especially this semester. We have a ton of fairs that we do every semester, so we'll highlight some of the key ones this season and let you know about the great ones that are coming up. And today I am here with my colleague Dustin Miller. Dustin, say hi to the people. Tell them what you're about.
Hey everybody, thanks again for taking the time to be here today on a Friday afternoon. As Natty said, my name is Dustin Miller. I'm an associate director here in Career Services, and I work specifically on the C's team. So happy to be here with Natty and with you all to give you some information about Career Fair season. We know it gets really busy.
Yep, and I'm Natty. I didn't actually introduce myself because I always forget. But happy to talk to people today. I'm on the Wharton team. Used to formerly be on the College of Arts and Sciences team. So we got a lot of representation for quite a few of the schools here. And if you're outside of those, we have other people in our office who can help too. But all of our fairs are open to every school. So even the ones that have a very specific industry sounding one, if you are a Penn student, you're in the right place. We have a fair for you. And just an overview of the kind of thing we're going to be talking about today. There's a kind of a big difference between the two styles of fairs and events that we do. Both the virtual fairs that you can use through Handshake platform, or just the in-person ones that are here on campus. Almost all of them, maybe all of them this season, are going to be in Houston Hall. Every now and then we have one fair that's on location in a different spot. The nursing fair last semester, for example, was in the nursing school. I think this semester they're all here in Houston Hall, though. Is that right, Dustin?
Yeah, pretty sure. And I think on a future slide too, we have some of the locations right now, but all physical fairs, I believe, are in Houston.
Yeah, but we're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare for both of those different style of events because there's a few differences between them that you want to take into account. In particular, we'll talk about the action items for how to prepare for those and what you can do ahead of time to help yourself kind of hit the ground running. We'll go through tips and best practices. One of the best things you can do to prepare is do some employer research. So we're going to highlight a lot of that, how you can research and learn more about the people who are going to be there so you're ready to ask good questions and engage with our employer partners and the recruiters here. And then just the day of tips and tricks that go on. A lot of it is virtual based because there's, I think, a lot of specificity of how the platform works. But we're certainly going to talk about the in-person fairs and what that looks like as well. And then when we get a chance, we'll do questions. I mentioned earlier that people are muted here, but if you want to throw things in the chat, Dustin and I are both happy to try to keep an eye on that and answer things as they come through. So feel free to write in there. Once we get to the question section, we can let you unmute if you wanted to ask something to the whole group. That's totally fine too. Anything you wanted to add here, Dustin?
No, I think we're ready to roll. Thanks for the overview.
So here's the big overview of the bigger fairs that we have this semester. The first really big one, I mentioned there's the real estate fair today, which is by Zell Lurie here on campus. So if you're interested in that, run to Houston Hall. I think it ends at 3, and you can always watch this virtually on YouTube later. Or if you want to come to the spring internship fair, that's our biggest like flagship fair of the season, has lots of different employers from many industries that you can think about. There's government, there's nonprofit, there's finance, there's consulting, there's some tech adjacent stuff, all sorts of different things, education. So it's a really, really good holistic fair, especially if you have a lot of different interests to come to, or if you just want to come see one of your favorite employers who's going to be there. The design fair is a little bit later. There is both an in-person and virtual version of that. So on February 6th, that is very much through the design school. However, even if you're not a master's student for the design fair, it's still open to undergrads. They will occasionally hire for undergrad positions as well. And same for if you're a master's student in another discipline. I would just mainly for that fair, just take a look at the employers who are coming and see what kinds of things they have posted to see if it's a good fit for you that you want to explore a little bit more about. The STEM fair is going to be a little bit later, February 13th, and that one is in person. So all of the sciencey stuff that you can think about will be there. And the spring all industry career fair virtually is going to be later towards the end of February, February 20th. We also, do we have it mentioned the all Ivy just in time fair, Dustin?
Yeah, so there's also going to be there's the environmental fair that's at the end of February too, which is an IB Plus consortium fair, and that's on site in at Columbia on Columbia's campus. So that's late February. And the one that Natty just mentioned is the one that I'm actually the contact for here at Penn this year. It's the Just in Time Fair, as Natty said. So it's later in April. So I know there's sometimes a craze of like, oh, I have to get a job right now. It's got to be in February or January. There are still plenty of employers that are looking to do some hiring, which is called the Just in Time Fair, just in time for summer, just in time for graduation. So be on the lookout for that later in April as we get some more information too.
And kind of like a minor point on that, a lot of these fairs, there's going to be a mix of, I would say the majority overall of these are going to be for upcoming this summer, whether that's full-time starting or for internships. However, for the spring internship and career fair, I know that there's also going to be some that are recruiting for summer 2026. Bain, for example, is going to be there. I'm sure they're going to talk about their consulting recruiting process, which is very early. There might be some finance people who are also recruiting. So wanting to talk to sophomores in particular who would start in their junior summer, if that's the case that you're in. That is only for those industries, finance and consulting. The majority of other industries that'll be at these fairs are going to be hiring for this upcoming summer. So I mentioned earlier, there are the two main styles of fairs. So the traditional career fair and the virtual career fair. Houston Hall is the place to be. You can kind of see in these photos a little bit. So we split the whole building basically in half. So we usually will have first half of the alphabet in one room, second half in another, between Hall of Flags, which is that top photo, and Bodeck Lounge, which is the bottom photo there. So when you come into Houston Hall, if you're coming in from across from College Hall, on the right will be Bodeck Lounge straight across, and then Houston or the Hall of Flags is on the left, and you go down the stairs there. Both will have probably about 20 or 30 employers in each room. So definitely make sure to check out both rooms. I think it's really easy to just go to one and then forget to head over to the other one, but see who's there at both. We'll have lots of different displays and ways to help guide you. But check it out that way. And then the virtual fair, everything's all in one place, which is really the best part about it. We'll talk more about that. But I really like that you can just kind of go into Handshake at your own pace, set up a schedule even before that day. If all you want to do is like a 10 or 15-minute one-on-one session with the one employer you're interested in, you can set that up, be in Handshake, do that 15-minute session, and then be done with it. So it's really a nice way to not feel like you have to wait in lines, and we'll look at that a little bit closer later. Anything else you wanted to add here as a kind of top level overview, Dustin?
No, I think that covers it great. Just also, it's busy throughout most of the time too. So if your strategy is, oh, I'm hoping to get there, early because I have to see that employer, it's okay. They're going to be sticking it out. And so if a line's busy and you need to go somewhere else and come back, I think that's totally fine, especially with class schedules too.
Yeah, we tell employers that they know that you are busy, you have classes, you have other things going on. So they kind of understand the drill there, which also goes to, we'll talk more about specific dress code. But we also tell employers to prepare for business casual and knowing that you're coming between classes. So don't freak out if you feel like, oh, I got to go all the way back to my apartment and I got to change into this and this, and I'm not going to have enough time to actually do anything. If the deciding factor between you actually attending the fair or not is what you're wearing, just come to the fair. We already tell employers to kind of expect you to be a busy person going between different classes. And so I'm going to give you just a screen grab of what things look like in Handshake as a starting point. This is the STEM fair that's coming up. Just an overview of that in Handshake. When you go to Handshake, if you go to the events section, there'll then be a button that says career fairs right after that, where you can see all the different fairs that we have. This one for STEM in particular, you don't even have to register. If you just show up to the fair, that's all. You just have to show up and show your pen card, and tap in, and we will get you a name tag printed out and ready to go. However, one of the things that we really want to highlight today is that going to the fair in Handshake ahead of time is going to give you a ton of information on the different employers who are going to be there, the jobs that they're hiring for, and give you a better sense of what to kind of think about before you kind of enter that space and make you a little bit more productive. If you hit that See Employers button there in the bottom right, you'll get a big list of everyone who's coming. You can filter it by industry. STEM's a little harder because they might all fall into similar industries, but especially like this spring career and internship fair, that might have 40 different industries on it, even though there's like 40 or 50 employers. So it'll be a good way to kind of sort out the ones that you want to make sure that you see in particular. And then the virtual fair, it looks almost the same at first. However, I think the big difference to be aware of is this one you definitely need to register for first, because the whole idea of a virtual fair is that you sign up ahead of time and then you create a schedule with the employers that you want to talk to. The virtual fair, like we are very happy to have you just swing by the day of in the middle of the thing, having never thought about the fair at all. Obviously, we think it's helpful to think about it beforehand, but even if you just wanted to swing by, that's good. For the virtual fair, it helps just to have a little bit of a heads up there because there's a limited number of slots available for each employer. They'll open up. You can go to a whole schedule once you register for the event, and you'll be able to select a time to meet with the employer that you're interested in talking to. There's that arrow showcasing like how you can test your video. Highly recommend the day before the fair, or whenever you get a chance to test, make sure everything's set up well, just so the experience is quick. Most of these sessions are only 10 minutes long, so to join a one-on-one session, you've so short amount of time to talk to an employer, ask good questions, make a good connection with them, that it's worth testing those things ahead of time so you can avoid as many technical troubles as possible. Where it says details over there on the left, I don't think this fair was fully open yet, so it didn't showcase quite yet. But you can look at your schedule there and build it and sign up for people. A lot of times, when you come to the virtual fair, people will start here and then not see where the full schedule is of events. So just look for that tab after details to see your full schedule and the whole schedule of employers who are coming. Um, there's also many times like a virtual help room. So around where that favorite button is and where that test handshake video button is, there'll be something if you want to chat with one of us, from career services. Most of the time, we're just there to make sure things are going smoothly and going well for you. If you wanted to just make sure that like maybe you couldn't get a hold of the employer that you thought you were and you wanted to check in with us, we can help with that. But sometimes people go there and they're like, where's the fair? What do I do? And we're happy to point you in the right direction, but where the fair is just in that other tab, past details. Anything else to add, Dustin, before we move on?
I just want to emphasize again, like thinking ahead of time and trying to really grab, if you're really interested in those one-on-one slots, they can go fast, certainly depending on the employer, because there's only a certain amount of time. So, sometimes we've had students that show up the day of the fair and they're like, hey, there's no more one-on-one, or I can't see one-on-one slots for ABC employer. And chances are that's because they were a really popular employer and somebody that they were hoping to. Group sessions, you still will have an opportunity to hopefully get in that same day if you weren't able to see that ahead of time. So I just wanted to really echo that point again, that if you have somebody in particular, you should be looking at this even now, to see if things have opened up.
Yeah, and that addresses one of the questions that came to me directly in the chat. So I think that helps. There was another question I saw too about just what should alumni do at the fairs. And really the same thing. I think everything we're talking about is also going to apply to alumni. The only thing to think about differently is take a look at the employers and see what types of roles they're hiring for, because probably it's going to be better for you to be talking to the employers who are focused on full-time jobs as opposed to the ones who are really there just for internships. So as much as you can see ahead of time before you come. For the in-person fairs, those are all still open to you. If you have an alumni pen card, that'll still work when you come to our check-in desk and sign in. I don't know if I expressly said this, but when you check in, all you do is you tap your pen card. We print out a little name tag for you. You can grab, if you want, either a paper copy of the map, or we'll often have QR codes there to see where employers will be. And then it's all yours. So that really the check-in process should only take about a second or so. And it'll work for your alumni pen card just as well as your student pen card. The only difference of like who can attend what between these fairs is that if you're an online only student and you're not in a residential degree program here at Penn, you can only attend the online fairs. But as long as you're a degree seeking student in any program here at Penn, you can attend both outside of that online specification. So Handshake does a really good job of highlighting the different ways in which you can get a ton out of the career fairs, especially from a virtual standpoint. I really like going through these blogs here because it helps you just get a sense of like what am I going to see when I go to the schedule? What's the video going to look like? What kind of functionality am I going to get when I go there? Like I said before, you have 10 minutes, so I think it helps just to familiarize yourself as much as possible ahead of time. Dustin, if you can, could you throw that link into the chat so people can have direct click access to it?
Yeah, for sure.
And then I'm gonna go onto the next page too, which also has a section or kind of a highlight of all the different types of info that Handshake has ready for you to learn more about. So we're going to obviously give you what we think is most important today. But if you wanted a little bit extra, Handshake also has both videos, blogs, and all sorts of things that can help you just feel more ready. I think they're particularly good for the virtual fairs, though. The in-person ones you can do a little bit there, but the virtual ones are way more focused on what the platform actually looks like. I'll grab it, Dustin, if you want to take over for a second.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so again, kind of being able to just like go through different blogs, prepare yourself with the information, like Natty was saying. I think that can be really nice, just in general, to have you feeling as best prepared as possible. Um, and then kind of shifting a little bit into, some perks of virtual fairs. So I know Natty mentioned earlier about the in-person fairs. You come in and there's two rooms and there's a lot of different people. The virtual career fair perks, there's no lines or major time constraints. One-on-one sessions are, set to a confined period of time, and it really gets you some of that individualized time with the employer. You can also really do some of that preparation and researching employers that you're going to be speaking with specifically, without distractions. So if you're somebody who maybe doesn't love being in super crowded spaces, or there's a lot of different voices, or you're trying to compete to get in line with different people, sometimes being able to have that quiet, controlled environment is really beneficial for some people. So that's just something to think about. If you feel like you operate better in that kind of space, that can be an advantage. And the group info sessions, the unlimited capacity is a really big thing. I think sometimes you'll see at the in-person fairs, popular employers again will sometimes try to gather loads and loads of students at one period of time to deliver the same information. So sometimes that can kind of happen here too. And again, you don't have to manage things like book bags or belongings. You can have your water with you. If you need to take a quick break to run, to the bathroom, you can do those things a little bit easier. So definitely think there are some perks to the virtual career fair. I think sometimes some people think that they might not be, as adequate or anything, and that's certainly not the case. I think there's so many benefits, more than that are just laid out here too.
And a couple of things I'll add to that. The group sessions are awesome because even though it's unlimited, if there's a ton of people who come to one session, it's a really popular employer. That's great because maybe you didn't get a chance to go for the one-on-one sessions. Then you should expect to see kind of more of a webinar style session that they'll lead. You'll still gain some access to the recruiter information that way and get to maybe follow up and connect with someone one-on-one later. But the thing that I like about group sessions too is that if it's a smaller employer and maybe only like, I think it's if it's under like 8 or under 10, maybe students attend a group session, it changes the format of the event. So the employer is much more engaged with having a conversation with you. So instead of it being webinar focused, like you can have your camera on and talk to the employer directly, just like a small kind of group Zoom meeting would be like. So just be prepared for that. Don't have that blindside you too much, especially if you're targeting an employer who you think isn't going to be as like 100+ people in a group session. But if it's a smaller employer, that's a really good way to connect with them. And then you have more time than a 10-minute session too, so you'll probably get a little bit more out of that. Um, the other thing I was going to mention about the virtual fairs is I kind of highlighted the different industries that come to our events. But a lot of times you're going to see familiar faces in terms of the types of employers you see, the types of industries that are represented. And some of that is just because it might be a company that's closer here geographically. It could be an industry that has more of a recruiting budget than other industries. That's especially true for like finance consulting. You tend to have big recruitment budgets, so they tend to make events like these fairs. The virtual fairs help level the playing field. So like last semester at one of the virtual fairs, we had Legendary Entertainment, who in media and television, film and TV, they're in California rather than them flying across the country to come do an event. They have a smaller recruiting budget, so it was easier for them to come to a virtual event too. So I think especially if you have like a diverse set of interests that you want to explore, virtual fairs can be really interesting because you get to see a ton of different type of employers that you wouldn't necessarily see at some of the in-person events. And here's some things of what you can do in advance to prepare. Um, Check the when things are going to open for registration, especially for the virtual events. When you go to the event, it'll tell you student registration starts at 10 a.m. on whatever day, whatever it might say. Um, if you know that there's going to be a Bain or a Google or like some huge brand name that's going to be in high demand, it's particularly important that I would check there close to when registration opens so that you can get a chance at one of the one-on-one sessions since they'll be pretty limited. We monitor how quickly those are filling up, and we'll often reach out to employers and say, hey, students are really eager to talk to you. Could you add another representative, or could you open up some more slots, or could you open an additional group session to help accommodate students? But just in case that employer can't, I think it just helps to be there early on. Um, a lot of the ways employers will see your information when you're attending a virtual fair, this is a little bit true for an in-person fair, but especially a virtual one, is through your Handshake profile. So if you haven't yet, update your profile, put what you did this winter break, put what you did last summer, put what you've been doing these past couple of semesters. And in particular, make sure that you make your profile visible to employers. That's super helpful because after the fair is over, that employer can go back and download a list of the resumes of the students they talk to. So that might help you get the job later if they're able to then see all your details and have access to that. So highly recommend to make sure that your profile is visible to employers. When you're in Handshake on your profile, you can look at the privacy settings. I think they're also available if you click on the top right where your name is, or the icon of where your face or initials. There's a security and privacy settings menu there. And I would choose the open to employer setting or the commute. I think it's community setting is the biggest one. But whichever one includes employers, we'll make sure you get all your details shown there. Upload your resume to Handshake. You could make a shareable link to that as well. Could be useful, especially if you're in a one-on-one session, you have 10 minutes and you might just want to throw into the chat. Here's my resume. Would love to talk through some of the things I have, or whatever it might be. For the virtual fair, definitely find a quiet place. You could sign up for through the library system all the different rooms and private rooms that are available there. We used to have space in McNeil. If you can tell, my background is different than what I've presented with in the past, because we're in a new building in 3935 Walnut Street, so it's right above the McDonald's. So we have less of those rooms, and the rooms that we do have aren't available yet. They're still literally being constructed right now. But the library system has a bunch of rooms that you could reserve if your own room in your dorm or in your apartment, you don't think it's going to be a quiet enough space for you. Have a professional outfit ready. Hey, for the virtual fair, just having a nice shirt is probably all you need to do. You could still wear gym shorts or sweatpants or whatever you want. For the in-person fair, we're going to talk a little bit more about what the professional outfit means. But for the virtual one, just make sure you look presentable. Take a screenshot of yourself on Zoom, or take a look at how things look, both for the background that you have behind you, make sure it's not distracting. For me, I got like nothing going on, so I didn't worry about it. Dustin has like a million things. He's got a cat that's jumping back and forth, but you can't tell because he put up a good enough kind of Zoom background there. So if you want to just add a virtual background, that's fine too. And then just look over the list of employers who are there. I think the one thing I wanted to add is for the in-person fairs too, making your profile visible is also helpful, because when you go to in-person fairs, you could use a QR code to sign in. And making sure your profile is visible will give that employer access to your details on Handshake, so they can follow up with you if they're interested in doing so. So it's helpful. This is mostly for virtual stuff, but I think that one in particular also speaks well to in-person. Anything to add there, Dustin?
No, that was great.
And next, I'll show you just like what it actually looks like when you go and see the schedule. This is an example if you wanted to sign up for a session with Novetta. They have one-on-one sessions. They also have group sessions available. When you see one-on-one, it'll just give you these different 10-minute time blocks that you can just choose one for. There's always more when you hit show, when it says show all available times, there's going to be a whole bunch more there. You can see the person that you'd be talking with, which is helpful. Sometimes that might give you a good chance to research, look at that person's LinkedIn, see what kind of thing they might be interested in talking about, or what kind of their expertise is in. For this one, this is pretty machine learning based, and all the people that they've brought that we can see here are more machine learning focused. But sometimes there'll be different teams, and that might also represent who's hiring for what position, or who's ready to talk about working on this team versus another one. So do a little bit of research there. But once you select that schedule, or once you select that time period, it'll go into your schedule specifically. So you can go look and see, okay, at 11:40, I'm meeting with Matthew. Everyone's named Matthew here. But another company might be, oh, okay, at 11:50, I'm meeting with so and so. The one thing that's kind of difficult about the virtual fairs is because they're 10-minute sessions, it can be really easy to book yourself really close back to back. So I would recommend if you're able to give yourself a buffer. Employers are going to be pretty fast paced, so they'll be trying to move things along quickly, but still just for like getting through to the right page and everything, give yourself some time so you feel like you're not having to arrive late or anything. I would give yourself at least a little bit of a buffer room there.
I would also just say too, real quick, is don't freak out if you can't get into your session like super early. I forget the exact time, Natty. I don't know if you know, but it's only a
I
couple
think it's
minutes
5 minutes
before,
before.
five
I
minutes
think,
before. Yeah,
yeah.
that you can actually get into the session because it's the video option is going to look grayed out and it's going to make it appear almost like that you can't get in. Don't worry. It's just it's coming. We definitely check within as it gets really close. We've had people have questions about that in the past, so don't panic. Just have to wait a little bit longer.
And then there are ways you can keep in touch with the recruiters that you talk to afterwards. I think this is one of the coolest features of having a virtual fair is that it's just built in. You can go in, see exactly who you talk to, and you can send them a message directly through Handshake. So you don't have to worry about, oh man, I forgot to get that person's name, I forgot to get that person's email address. You can just go into Handshake, hit send message, and send them a thank you. Say, hey, thanks. It was great talking to you yesterday at the virtual fair. I learned a ton about whatever. Look forward to staying in touch. Something simple, doesn't have to be a whole lot, but that's one way that you can be more memorable. I certainly remember people better when I get a thank you note from them. And I think it signals to them that you are truly interested. You weren't just kind of like seeing what was what and then decided that you wanted to go a different way. I think it really does signal to the employer that you're invested in working for them in the future. So just something quick that way. We have other resources on our website, in particular in the Make Connections and Network section, if you wanted to try to find someone's email address to reach out. But I think this kind of bypasses that whole process and makes it a little bit easier for you to just message them directly in the system. Um, I think one thing I want to add to that we don't have an explicit slide on, I don't think, but just is like what are these conversations? What do they look like? Like when you're talking to a recruiter, and this goes for both an in-person fair and a virtual fair. What kind of things do you say to those people? And there's a few ways you can take it. I mean, they're used to talking to people. That's their job. Most people who are there have talked to hundreds of students, if not more, about this. I think the biggest thing is have a good sense of who you are, what you're interested in. That can be a really easy way to start the conversation with a quick like elevator pitch intro of, hi, I'm Natty. I'm a junior in the college, and I'm really interested in machine learning. So I was interested to talk more and learn about the types of opportunities you have at Novetta or whoever it might be. That's a great way to start the conversation. If you've done the research, which is what we're going to go into next, if you've done research in the company, then you can have some really easy questions teed up that like, oh, I saw on your website that you're hiring a lot in this particular department. Could you tell more about what those roles are like? Or have something like really specific to that company. And that's always going to stand out to those people. For the in-person fair, we get a lot of questions like, should I bring a resume or not? Um, you can. I think it can be a good talking point where even if they're not taking resumes, you could just say, you could have it and say, oh, you can see like last semester I was able to work on this project, was really excited to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And you kind of hand it to them and let them review it that way. That's one way that they can also remember you, kind of get a little bit more of an in-depth background in terms of who you are pretty quickly. Anything to add about like what those conversations feel like, Dustin, that I didn't cover?
I think just trying to get past as quickly as possible the awkwardness of the conversation because a lot of people will say like, "Oh, well, I don't. This is weird," or "This feels unnatural," and I'll just say that's okay. It's a very normal feeling, but like Natty said, the job for these folks is to speak to people. They're really good at it, and so allowing your authentic self to come through, and I think preparing some of those genuine questions can show them who took the time to do that research, and I think that can pay dividends a little bit later down the road and it can be the smallest of things. Try to remember something personal from the conversation that you can point out in a follow-up message. I'm going to talk a little bit later too, just about that and like the art of the follow-up a little bit. Um, but I guess the overarching tip is like, don't be afraid of the conversation. It can feel a little uncomfortable and awkward, but it's totally normal and a practice and behavior that I think is really encouraged, especially at these types of events.
Yeah, the other thing that like I think students by and large have really good experiences with these conversations. I almost never hear of a bad interaction. Everyone is always really excited. The employers too. We do employer feedback forums, and they always feel really great having been able to talk to you all. So I'm confident the conversations will go well. However, one thing that I do occasionally hear as like a tripping point is I'll give an example of if it's like a company where maybe their main focus is a different area and they're coming to hire for a really particular role. Maybe they're coming to hire for software engineers for their website, but what they really do is based in marketing, for example. And you come, you're interested in marketing, and you come and say, "Hi, I really love marketing," and the person says, "Oh, I only know about software engineering roles." Something I would just think about is I think most recruiters are going to be pretty good at navigating that conversation. But I would think about ways in which you can kind of pivot and talk more about like company culture, things you like about that company. Because even if that person has a different job role or maybe came to provide expertise on a different job than the one that you're really interested in, they can still provide really useful insight into what it's like working at that company, what the process was like getting onboarded or started there. There's so many things that will probably overlap between different departments that can be valuable. And then towards the end of that conversation, rather than just being like, oh, okay, bye, I just waited in this line and I'll go talk to someone else, you can make that conversation a little longer. And then towards the end, you could always ask, is there any other way I can stay in touch? Or is there anyone that you know of that would be good for me to talk to in the future? And maybe they can point you in the right direction for who the marketing person might be, or in that example that I kind of made up on the spot. All right. So with that kind of aside, all out of the way, we're gonna talk about researching employers. I think this is like the most important thing that you can do to prepare. This is where you can really showcase your interest in the company, have really detailed questions that you can get the most out of these conversations in a short amount of time. And although I think it's really useful, it doesn't mean that if you see an employer that you didn't research that you can't talk to them. So still be comfortable going and talk to them. We mentioned earlier about those conversations. If you have a good sense of who you are, I think that'll help lead the conversation, even if you don't know a lot about that employer. But I want to focus on ways that you can hopefully know a little bit about that employer beforehand, just to make the process a little bit easier. So, some of the things that you might want to be either thinking about, asking about, or learning about ahead of time could be the company culture, types of positions that they have available, the different industries or services within that what that company covers. Maybe even who their competitors are. I think sometimes learning a little bit about competitors can be a good way to understand what one company values versus another company. And sometimes companies even see themselves that way. Like they know that such and such is the person that people kind of relate us to the most, but here's how we differentiate ourselves. And many times they might have that on their presence online. And if you're able to voice something compelling about that in your how you talk about the company and the questions that you ask, that's going to make you stand out as an applicant. And you're going to showcase your research and preparation in a really meaningful way to the person that you're talking to. And most of this you can probably find on the company's website. You could find it maybe in their socials if they have an Instagram, a TikTok, or whatever. It could just be from the news. You have lots of resources available to you through Penn's library system. So there might be even like specific publications through like a research publication that might have something like really tailored and niche about what that company did. Or it could just be like the Wall Street Journal, which you also have access to through Penn. Maybe there's just a discussion on a recently acquired company or a new deal or a new way in which they're looking at things from a business perspective. Um, we have a few other ways that we'll highlight how to do some extra research. But I think those are kind of the starting points that I think are easiest. Anything to add, Dustin?
Just that sometimes on Handshake too, they can have some information about like specific types of students or fields of study major that they are looking to talk to. And so maybe if you are trying to avoid the awkward encounter that Natty mentioned a little bit earlier about like, oh, I'm only here to talk to such and such. Um, if you still want to talk to that company, you could come in with that knowledge. Hey, Natty, so nice to meet you. I know you're here specifically to talk to software engineers. I'm really into marketing. I still wanted to know if you'd be willing to share with me about the company. You know what I mean? And you can still kind of drive the conversation, but just sometimes there are those small blurbs on Handshake when you're looking at the employers that are going to be attending the fair that can also help you with just like a baseline and initial research point.
Yeah, and sometimes I think good recruiters and good companies who are really well versed in recruiting will not make as many assumptions. But every now and then you get an employer who just says to themselves, we really need someone who's great at this thing, which means they must be this major. So you might even see on their job posting or something, they say they prefer a certain major. And if you don't fit into that category, that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to those people. You still might be able to highlight the key skills that you have that you feel are going to make you really strong in that position. But like Dustin said, if you're coming to it already ahead of time, you could even talk about even though I'm not a comp sci major, I have a lot of experience working on X, Y, and Z projects or something like that, and would love to be able to put those skills to good use. And that might help kind of drive the conversation forward in a more productive way than if they just say, "Oh, what major are you?" And you're like, "English," and they're like, "Okay, never mind." I was an English minor. I love English. I'm just using it as an example of sometimes people don't always think of the key transferable skills there. But some of your preparation might be as you're looking at these things, how do I translate my background to accommodate what the employer is asking for? And that could be related to your major. How do I spell that out? That could be just in how you tell your story overall and talk about your past experiences. Um, some of the resources you can use, we mentioned already Handshake. I wanted to address a question that was kind of related to Handshake too. Someone asked just, are you going to get explicit recruiter information after one-on-one sessions for virtual fairs? And the answer is probably not. That's why you can send that message directly. However, sometimes in Handshake, you might be able to find a recruiter's information there. But there's other ways to do that as well through, I mentioned earlier, the Make Connections and Network section, Career Shift in particular, could be really good to find people's contact information as long as you remember their name or take a chance to jot that down. But Handshake has lots of info, not just their current postings, but you could also look at their company profile, how they talk about themselves. Maybe they have an additional info session. A lot of companies who come to the fair will also do an info session the day before or maybe the week after. There's a lot of extra things they might be doing to try to continue to teach you more about what they're interested in. Mention the company's website. LinkedIn is a really good place to do that, not only because you'll learn more about the company, but you can take a look at real life examples of people who work at that company or have worked there previously and get a sense of perhaps their career trajectory. Maybe if it's someone who's an analyst or a starting level role, you can many times see, oh, they had this internship, which led to this, which then put them in this position. And that can help you think about how to set yourself up well. Um, or you could see like Penn alum who are in positions of interest too. A lot of these companies, when they come, make an effort to make sure they're bringing Penn alum who recently graduated. And sometimes that can be really exciting for those Penn alum who are now coming back to campus for the first time in a year or two. But if you notice that on LinkedIn, that can be an easy way to highlight and be like, oh, I noticed you're an alum, welcome back to campus, kind of thing. Make conversation go well. We'll highlight some of the vault guides coming up in a few slides, I think. But vault guides are essentially industry guides that go through all the day in the life, all the specifics of who are the top companies in this industry, where are the hot locations to work at, like all sorts of different things about that industry. They're essentially like 100+ page PDFs that go through really in depth. And it's a resource that we give you access to. We pay for it so that you can access it for free. So I think all you need to do is access it through our website. If it doesn't let you in right away, sometimes you might just need to create an account using your Penn email address, and that'll do the trick. We're going to highlight Lippincott Library in a little bit too. For those unfamiliar with it, it is Wharton's library, but it is open to everyone at Penn. They have lots of really good industry resources, business, company details. They have pitch book and investment details, all sorts of different things that could be useful to you and as you're conducting research. And then Glassdoor. Glassdoor can give you a really good example of people's reviews of a company. They'll often give a little bit of like, here's an interview question I had. Here's what I liked about the company culture or the people I worked with. So sometimes I can get you some real life examples that, every company's website is going to say we're a great place to work. But sometimes you'll see some more specific things on Glassdoor about how that person liked working there or what types of opportunities they had for advancement or mentorship or all sorts of different things. And this is where you can kind of look more in Handshake to the employers page. I think it's really easy to miss the employer section. If you follow employers, you can really quickly be able to see them right at the top when you go to this employer section. You can also get so many more details of what they do. which you can see here. I really like, so Handshake is a really big system. It is most colleges and universities in the US use Handshake at this point. So you see here, there's an example of someone who is a summer analyst recently with Cornerstone Research, but they gave a little bit of review. This is what the application process was like. Uh, Further down, they talk about the interview process, what kind of questions were asked, what do they like about it. And this person's from Tufts, and we're not Tufts, but you still get to crowdsource and learn a little bit more from that person. Sometimes you'll see someone who is from Penn, and I think it usually brings those to the top just because it knows you're a Penn student. But that could be an easy way to be like, oh, there's an upperclassman. I didn't realize they were interning there last year, and maybe you make a good connection that way. Um, and I think this reviews and interview section is really useful because of that. But there's tons of stuff also to find in the overview section. Anything to add there, Dustin?
No, that's good.
And I mentioned a little bit like the peers you find in Handshake can be useful. Same thing, it's a wide system, so you can find all sorts of people. When you go to I think it says people is the tab. When you go to the people section, you can search really broadly. Or right here is just a mini screenshot of if you're at a specific employer page, it'll say here are a few students that interned there recently, and I can message each of them. Or you could hit see all to better filter on are they from University of Pennsylvania specifically? Or maybe you want to find people who just have a certain major, the same major as you, so you have that shared experience or have something else that's specific about you. And then I'll pass it over to you, Justin, to go through Vault Guides a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Natty. So we're just going to wrap up kind of some additional research opportunities and resources that you have, and then we'll get into some of like the days or the day of tips and tricks. So again, Vault Guides, like Natty said, it's something that we've already, purchased and paid for so that you have an opportunity to use them yourself. So whether it's specific company guides, an industry guide, or if you're not sure about a specific company, but you're more so like, what does this kind of job do, or what's are some maybe key skills or things that I should be honing in on? The interviewing guides I think are also really helpful, and that's going to be something that maybe might not necessarily be something you're going to use for the career fair portion of your job search, of your internship search, but it's definitely something that you want to revisit a little bit later on. And just a reminder as well, our office does do interview preparation and mock interview appointments too. So if you search Vault on the Career Services website, you should be able to see a whole bunch of different ones. And again, the industry guides, I think in particular, are quite helpful as you're trying to learn more about an industry, certain companies, and things of that nature as well. The Lippincott Library of the Wharton School that Natty mentioned a little bit earlier. Again, so it's open. So if you get to the homepage of that, you'll see on the screen here the business research guides that are circled. And you can go to the next slide, which is going to show you career information. And then from the career information section, you're going to be able to find a little bit more info. There's also specific librarians that are attached to this information. So if you have a question that you want to ask something a little bit further, or if you need clarification, you can definitely use them. They're wonderful resources that you have. And I think that can be really nice just to be able to, again, do some well-rounded research of companies. You never know what piece of information might come up in a conversation or in a follow-up or something like that. So we just want to make sure that you knew about the access that you do have, again, to such a wonderful resource. Natty, anything to add about the Lippincott or Vault Guides at all?
I just think Lippincott Library is amazing. I think a lot of times Wharton students know to use it because it's obviously part of the Wharton ecosystem and just how it's structured and named. But like I said before, it is open to absolutely everybody. It's in Van Pelt. Um, so when I was a advisor on the college team, I think a lot of times college students didn't always think about Lippincott as a resource they could go to right away. But there's so much useful stuff in there, especially in the companies and industry sections. And sometimes when you go to that specific industry, you'll find way more than you even realized was available. It's just a really, really good tool.
So again, just ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help in your preparation. That's something we wanted to drive home. And so that first chunk, I know we spent a lot of time and Natty laid it out really nicely about the research because it is so important. But now we have arrived at the day of, right? And so what are some tips and tricks so that you're able to get the most out of this experience? I feel like that's a question I will get a lot during my one-on-one appointments or workshops or group sessions. Oh, but Dustin, like, do the career fairs work? And I think they work if you make them work for you. So that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about, whether they be in person or virtual. So just what are three things employers want to know? So at a very high level, they want to know, how are you going to contribute to that organization? Why do you want to work for them? And what are you going to be like as a coworker? So I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way back up. The what are you going to be like as a coworker? This is something I think a lot of students don't think about, or just people in general. They're also evaluating what a cultural fit looks like. How do you describe yourself? Have you practiced that? Are you someone that they could see working alongside on a project with? Could you see yourself going out to lunch with them? And Natty, I think, was actually on when I was, coming to this office a couple of years ago, was on the search committee. And I'm not sure if he thought about if we would be able to get lunch together one day, but Natty and I do get lunch occasionally now too. So people are also evaluating that type of information as well. So how would people describe you? What are you like as somebody to work alongside? It's not always about the experience, like the hard technical experiences or skills that you have. It's also about who you are as a person. Why do you want to work for them? So all of those resources that we talked about earlier, most employers you're going to go talk to are going to be curious. You should be able to kind of come up with an answer at this point based off the research that you've done that can kind of give some compelling reasons as to why. They want to know why you, what makes you a little bit different. And if you can showcase that research and share genuine interest with them, I think that goes a really long way. And then also, then obviously, how can you contribute? What can you bring to the table? I think in addition to what can you contribute with past experience, what you're also looking to learn is an important piece of the conversation. So it should be a two-way street. I feel like when you're looking for an employer, whether that be for an internship or a full-time job, you should be able to pour into them, but hopefully they're giving you something back that you can grow as a professional too. So I think it's just really important to keep these three things in mind at a very high level of what they're looking to know. And these questions here can give you an idea of what maybe you should be preparing for when you're having these conversations. Anything to
Yeah,
add there,
so
Natty?
overall, being like warm and friendly goes a long way because a lot of times these people are going to be advocates for you in some sort of way, especially if it's a recruiter or someone. They may be advocating for you to get an interview or do something else. So just remember that these people are either your future colleagues that you'll work directly with, or people who might be speaking on your behalf in the future too.
Yeah, definitely true. And they're talking to so many people, especially at the fair. So if you're that person that takes like the extra time to like try it, just ask them, be like, how are you doing? Like I bet I imagine this is a lot where you're on like hour three of talking to students. So it's okay. Just be human. They're human as well. They believe it or not, they went through an interview process and a job search to get the job that what they're doing right there in that moment. So they've been on that side of the table. So I think it's nice to keep that in mind just to humanize the entire experience. So some best practices for in-person fairs. We're going to talk about attire, what to bring, arrival and greeting, and then knowing how to follow up as well. So again, Natty mentioned, and it really is true. People come in any and almost all different attires for the in-person fairs in particular. We really do try to convey that information, as Natty mentioned earlier, to employers that students are running from class to class, meeting to meeting in between those things. And they're really just excited to have an opportunity to speak with you. And I think you'll even see that shift with our fairs, with how employers are dressing as well. So I don't think that it's going to be like a huge pressure as maybe as it once used to be. But still, I still feel like it's important to want to put your best foot forward. I don't think there's pressure to go find something new, or if you don't have something, you can also look into the career closet as well about like making an appointment if there was something that you would, be looking for. Um, and also, it's been really cold. I'm sure for any of you who are here in Philadelphia on campus, you know that it's been in the single digits. Hopefully, it's not like that in the coming weeks with the fair. But just maybe bring a jacket. It's going to be cold, but it definitely gets busy in there as well. So, a couple of different options. Whatever makes you feel confident, I think, honestly, at the end of the day, is important. Um, Many people probably won't be in, a full suit or a full, pantsuit or something. But if you're like, this feels good to me and this makes me feel confident, certainly nobody's going to stop you from coming in like that as well. So just consider that. A lot of different options. So Natty mentioned earlier, you definitely want to bring the pen card. It's going to be the quickest way and the only way that you're going to be able to actually get into the fair. And it's going to get you that name tag, as Natty mentioned. I am a fan of bringing resumes. I think it's nice, even if they're not collecting them, you are able to reference it. Like Natty said earlier, it can be sometimes people are comfortable just having something in their hand as they're speaking to somebody too. But then for those folks who are going to be collecting resumes, you probably would print out anywhere from maybe 10 to 15 copies, maybe more, depending on the employers that you're hoping to speak with. Pen and pencil for any notes. I'm not a huge fan of bringing, sometimes I'll see people walking around with like laptops open and stuff like that during the fair. That can be kind of clunky and make conversation a little bit awkward. So if you have a pen and pencil just to jot things down, or if you're asking for that contact information at the end, I think that can be best. And keeping the resumes, pen, pencil, and that paper kind of all inside a Padfolio, I think is really nice. The less things you have to carry, the better. The spaces do get crowded for sure. Having water is fine, but we really don't want people walking around with like different coffees and having like plates of like food, or if you're coming right from the dining hall and you're trying to have a conversation, that can certainly get in the way a little bit. Um, Oftentimes students will come as they're checking in and be like, "Oh, do you have somewhere where I can like put my big jacket or my big bag and my book bag? Can I put that down somewhere?" And no, we don't really have that space for the in-person fair. But we also really don't want people walking around again with the confines of the space there a little bit. So if you can avoid bringing it, great. Um, if you come with it, that's obviously not going to be a problem, but just mostly for your own benefit. Um, Small things like making sure your phone's not on, that you're in a conversation, all of a sudden, your friend's group chat is blowing up and your phone starts dinging and going off, or maybe your mom or your aunt's calling, or your dad, whoever. So make sure your phone's silencing, maybe on do not disturb for those conversations. And this is something also very small, but you might not think about it. If you're wearing another organization's logo and you're approaching a company who might be a competitor, or might be just maybe not even, or could be industry adjacent or something, think about it. You are putting on a presentation of yourself and for what you're trying to convey. So, you just might want to think about those things in particular. Now, if you want to do like, I guess, like a quick costume change and you want to rep your favorite company's logo as you show up, because you're going to talk to them and you want to go change after that, by all means, go ahead, do what you have to do to, grab their attention. I think that's great. But just again, a small thing to think about. Nettie, any other best practices, like what to bring or what not to bring
The only thing I
from
was
what
going to
you've
say is
seen?
just consider the industry of who you're talking to. That might help link both the entire attire of what to wear and what you want to bring to them. For example, like neither Dustin or I work with design students very much, but I've seen when I volunteer at the design fair, sometimes people will bring like their iPad to showcase their portfolio of things like architecture designs and things that they've worked on in the past. And that makes perfect sense for who they're going to be talking to and what they're going to be showcasing. And so an example for you could just be knowing that like if you're talking to a lot of investment banks, like you might want to up a little bit the attire if you're able to, as opposed to if you're talking to tech companies, the tech companies are going to be there in a t-shirt and jeans anyway, so you don't have to worry about it hardly at all. But just kind of measure things based on that.
Yeah, so true. And I think all of that goes into the research portion that we talked a little bit about earlier too. So another thing that you can kind of keep in mind. So in person now, smile. Are we shaking hands? Kind of read the room a little bit with what somebody may or may not be comfortable with. And then that 30-second spot, there's a line of students behind you. You just waited in line. You're finally at the front and it's your opportunity. So make sure that you practice this to a friend, to your roommate, call somebody, practice it to yourself, record yourself. That's fine, just to see some things that you might be sharing. I think it's nice, but they know you're a student at Penn, right? So you don't have to be like, oh, like I'm a student at, here at Penn. Maybe just try to find information, like your name, I think is important, what you're studying. If you have a related experience, wonderful. If there's an experience that you're looking to have and you know that they have that, I think that's great. At the end of this self intro, I like to include something personal. I think it just kind of like breaks the or brings the temperature of the room down a little bit. So whether that's somebody who enjoys playing pickleball or going on hikes or canvas painting, playing their musical instrument of choice, whatever it might be, just again to kind of show that human element and humanize the process. I think that can be really nice. And then you want to have your question prepared, whatever your opening question is going to be for that specific employer. And again, if you've done the preparation, this shouldn't be something that you have to think about or come up with on the spot, which should take some pressure off of you and really allow you just to be present in the conversation and to listen. Um, but the thing I want to emphasize the most is you're allowed and encouraged to be excited. We want you to be excited about the opportunity that all these employers have come to speak specifically, with you. They're excited. You can be excited. And I think that is remembered. Natty mentioned earlier about just being like warm and friendly. Those things really do go a long way. There's the saying, people don't always remember what you did, but people will remember, how you made them feel. And this is an opportunity to do that in a first impression. Anything to add, Natty, when you're just kind of like kicking off the conversation?
No, I think it's great. I want to highlight, like, someone had sent me a message that I answered in chat directly to them. But it was like sometimes it feels like you're bragging. And I think a lot of times a way to not make it feel like you're just being really self-centered is to give them a story. Like t if you're being a storyteller, I think a lot of times it helps them see you and you show them something as opposed to just telling them, as opposed to just saying I'm the best at whatever. You can show them an example of, oh, that reminds me of when I was working on this project. And sometimes I can even talk about how you collaborate and work with others, and goes to all the things that Dustin said about just being someone they would be really excited to have on their team or just work with and have around the office.
So now this art of the follow-up that we've talked about a little bit, this is why it's important to be engaged in the conversation. You want to do, and if you have that contact information, I think it's great. And I'm okay with, kind of asking if there's something at the end of the conversation. Oh, like, are you comfortable sharing an email address? Would you mind connecting on LinkedIn? I don't know if everybody asks that, so that might give you a little bit of a leg up as far as communication goes. So recapping what you have learned, kind of as you're closing out the conversation, reiterating your interest and maybe intention of next steps. Maybe you talked about when that application is going to be opening up or when you should be on the lookout for a certain program to have opened. That is going to be something to show that you were engaged in the conversation. What's the best way to stay connected throughout the process? Is there a online portal that I should be submitting these things? Am I submitting application materials maybe directly to you, or letting you know when I've officially applied? And then sending a thank you note, like Natty mentioned. I've also never forgot when someone has sent a thank you note. I think that really just reiterates a strong interest, level of professionalism, including something personal from the conversation. So if you shared with the person like, hey, like I love hiking, and they're like, oh, I'm going to hike in, the Shenandoah State Park in, West Virginia or something like that, or in Virginia, like over the weekend, and you remembered that and you brought it up in a thank you note. I think that just really shows again the human element and the fact that you were engaged in the conversation is important. Something I don't have on here, but I do want to point out is if you do hand them your resume, or if they say, hey, like we're not collecting resumes or whatever it might be, I would really consider attaching your resume digitally to an email if you're able to, if you have that contact information, and just acknowledging like, hey, I'm sure you got, tons of resumes yesterday, including mine, or, I know you weren't collecting resumes yesterday. Just wanted to pass along and share my resume here so that you had it here in front of you too. Daddy, anything else to add here?
Nope, no, I think that's great. And I think the biggest thing is it's the low risk. It'll probably take you like a couple minutes to think about. You're really just being friendly. Like the worst case scenario with this is that it took you like 5 minutes and they didn't look at it very closely. Whereas like the upside is that they remember who you are. They're excited to talk to their colleagues about the great connection they made with someone. There's so much upside that I would try to do it as much as you can and just take the extra couple minutes to do so.
Yeah, and like Natty said, what's the worst thing that happened? Most people actually don't get back to thank you notes all the time, just trying to be like equitable and things of that nature too. So it's actually not even all that common to get a response on a thank you note. So don't worry, there still is a very high chance that they read it, appreciated it, and took stock of it as they moved on. And then specific to virtual fairs, we talked about this a little bit. Just make sure, a preferred browser, the Handshake platform performs well with, Chrome and Firefox in particular, having that link ready. But again, not panicking if it's not able to hop into the video until a couple minutes right before. And then just being aware of your sound settings, just Zoom etiquette or, video conferencing etiquette in general, being muted for group sessions until something is opened up, and obviously being unmuted for your one-on-ones. It'd be a really awkward conversation if you decided to stay muted for your entire 10 minutes of your one-on-one session. And Natty mentioned earlier too about having just a clean background. So keep that in mind as well. If you have roommates and they're going to be around, maybe like letting them know so they could not be around. If you need to do the space, or if the space you'd like to be in is in your room, that's just something to think about too. And then again, if you're going to cancel a session for any reason, definitely recommend doing that so that somebody else would have an opportunity to sign up for that session if they see it. So it can be really frustrating for, both students and employers, if you register for a bunch of one-on-one sessions and then, you don't cancel or you don't show up. That does take an opportunity away from somebody else and that employer's time at the fair. So just be considerate in that nature too. And if you do have to cancel for, a reason other than, you're just uninterested, you can maybe try to include some information about reconnecting at some point in time.